So we spoke last week about Ravina who wanted to make a HaCohen from a Nachash in order to be metar kol sheretz. And the halacha wasn't like that. So he's going to explain to us a little bit what kind of timis are we talking about, what is the Nachash and what is the sheretz. So he says the Nachash and the sheretz hem shnei roshei atimois shel lo sirtzach v'lo sinaf. So we all know that Kadosh Baruch Hu created life in a koima, in the form of a human being, and each koima has a right and a left, a up and a down, and the front and the back. That's also the same nature when the physical manifests. Everything has to have a height and a depth and a width so that it can have existence. If it doesn't have the three dimensions, then it can't manifest into existence. So spiritually, the Sitra Achra is considered to be Zeh Le'uma Zeh, which means that for everything, for every midah, for every emotion that comes up to you, and there's a good way to use it, there's also going to be a bad way to use it, because how we use these forces that are within us is up to the individual that lives inside. If he's in a good state, he uses his midah, he uses whatever he gets inspired to do in the proper manifestation. He creates something good. But if a person is in a bad state, he can manifest something evil, can manifest something bad. And that causes that midah to show us its ugly face, to show us its ugly side. That this midah, even though it's a good midah, if it's used wrongly, it can be bad. So that's what the Sitra Achra represents. The Sitra Achra means the other side, meaning that there's an otherness to it. It's not really you. And the other is something coerced, something compulsive, something that's not within our nature. And it manifests itself through us being, for whatever reason, in a bad mode, in a bad state, because of an emotional injury or because we've created a negative outlook on life in general already. And then when our middas get aroused, they get aroused in a way that's not positive, that's not helpful. And that's called the Sitra Achra, the other side of the human experience, the other side of the human manifestation. And this came into existence by the Chet of the Nachash, by the Chet of the Eitz Hadas. Through the Eitz Hadas, we got into a framework where we can be toiv and ra. Our das can be good, can be beneficial to man, and our das can also be ra. It can be detrimental to man. And the goal that we're trying to attain is that our das should only be good, that we should go back into a state where everything is good, because then there will be no evil, there will be no evil inclination, there will be no Yetzer Hara, there will be no maves, there will be no problems or crying or hurting, because all these things are manifestations of the evil inclination, of the otherness within creation. The otherness that was created by man through misunderstanding, through a bad das. And das is inside the person. Das is the mind of the person, the understanding, the conscious part of the person. That's where the damage was done, and that's where the damage needs to be healed. Now, in this manifestation of evil, we have two sides. We have the right side and the left side. Just like in the manifestation of a perfect human, we have the right side and the left side. We have his sarah chesed, his kindness, his ability to enhance other people's experiences, his ability to make other people feel at ease and feel comfortable and feel pleasure in this world. That's his proper manifestation of chesed. And against that, he has the midah of gvura, where he needs to protect himself from anything that's there to hurt him. And this is also within our very vital organs, that we have the part of the body which runs the body, which out of the kindness of its nature runs everything that we need run within our being, within our person. And we have the other portions of us who are there to protect us against disease, like the immune system, and all the other organs that are there clearing the blood from all the different germs and all the different problematic particles that circulate in the air. Our body has all these protections in it because of the midah of gvura, as well as the midah of netzach, which is the determination to continue existence, the ambition, the drive. But mainly, gevura is about protection, to protect the human being. Now, these two have manifested in the world of otherness. When people were in an other state, in a state where they're not themselves, they manifested these two middos as leisinaf and leisirtzach. That's why there's a loy before these words, because those are not really who we are. Those are lehim acherim. Those are performances that are not within our nature. they come from the otherness within man. As man opposes where he is and he starts fighting with reality, these are going to be his manifestations of chesed and gevura. Instead of chesed, being kind to other people, he's going to be kind to himself on account of other people, which is niyuf. And instead of protecting himself and only having the ability to use his strength for his own purpose, he can use that as ritzicha, as using that strength against other people that have no intention even of harming him. This is already him projecting out his otherness, projecting out his problems that he has against reality upon other people, as if they're his problem. And then that causes him to have the rage that he should have had against himself, against other people. And that causes the midah of ritzicha. So we've learned last week, the Tzodok teaches, that the midah of ritzicha has no place in Klal Yisrael. That's why we find that a Torah that speaks Lashon Hara, he goes out michutz lemachne Yisrael. Because a divine shevet, a shevet that recognizes who created them, regardless of what level they are spiritually and how connected they are, just the basic knowledge of knowing who we are is enough that a person shouldn't want to hurt another human being. If a person doesn't understand that, he's not shaykh to Klal Yisrael. He hasn't understood the basic precept of the Torah, which is that we are all divine beings. We are all meant to be a kisei HaKoved, a collective ability for the human intelligence to manifest in this world, which it doesn't have the ability to do if we don't behave, if we don't coexist appropriately. Because some people believe that Judaism came to the world to teach us that there was a creator to the world. Somebody created the world. And he has rules, and we have to follow them. But that was known way before Judaism. The Torah didn't teach this fact, and the Torah itself is made that the Goyim called HaKadosh Baruch Hu Elekayu Elekim, the God of gods, the Lord of the lords, the power beyond all powers. So that's not what Judaism came to tell the world. What Judaism came to tell the world is that somebody is the world. Not just somebody created the world, somebody is the world. And we are all particles of his being. We are all, as a collective, as a group, the place where that magnificent intelligence that created life can interact with his creation. That's us. So what Judaism came to tell us is that we should be trying to get along in order so that we don't ruin his day. Because he's trying to be over here. He is already over here, and we are part of his being, and we're not allowing him to be in peace. We're not allowing him to be appropriately. And this is the first part of Bechikosa that says that if we're going to behave appropriately, then life is going to cater to you, and we will all find peace, which means that the greater being will be at peace. This is ultimately the goal, and this is ultimately what we call the Shechina. That there's going to be Izgalas HaShechina that's going to be upon the entire globe, covering all of humanity, that people will recognize who we are and why we are here and how we operate, so that we don't get in each other's way, so that we can help each other, enhance each other's experiences, instead of just competing over the materialistic possessions that most of us compete over. That doesn't really enhance the life the way that it pretends to do. They have special people marketing all these possessions to other people with all kinds of pictures in order to entice people to think that these things, these gadgets, these whatever they are going to cause you to feel smiley and happy and calm. But the reality is otherwise, and that means that it's kishuv. They're programming people to think that this can bring them peace, but it can't. Peace is in the opposite direction. Peace is internal. Peace is a certain recognition of simplicity, where a person can stay and recognize the unity within his experience. Recognize the safety of that unity. Recognize why it's a prized possession. And from there can manifest the proper human being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, because that's within his nature. Even when he's misbehaving, even when he's over on Leisenov and Leisertzach, what do we see? We see that behind these are these incredible, beautiful human traits of Chesed and Gevura. Meaning that even in him, what's waking up is really a divine midah, but the way that he's interpreting it is causing damage. So this alone is made to us. It tells us that behind what's happening is something true, something real. If you can understand the language, then even a Rosh's behavior is made on the Yichud. It's made that within him, he has these qualities. He just misunderstands them and he misuses them. So everything is made on the Yichud. Nothing can be made away from the Yichud. That's what Reb Meir was teaching us before. That within everything you find that it's all there to serve the right purpose. It's just being misused. It's just being used in a way that's not useful to humanity. So these two midos, these are the prime midos. Just like Ahava and Yira are the prime motivations that lead people to do things. These two midos are the primary examples of misusing these two forces. So when the body gets animated by Ahava and it gets misused, that's going to lead to Eloi Sinov. It's going to lead to pain that's caused by somebody's pursuit of pleasure. And when a body is motivated by Yira, by Gvuras, and it's misused, it's going to manifest as Ritzicha, which is simply hurting somebody else on account of trying to gain some other calculation, something non-humane, something that has nothing to do with humanity. It's just an imagined desire, a propulsion, a compulsion. So when a person does things compulsively, eventually he ends up hurting himself because he's not doing it from a proper state. It's not coming from a healthy place. So the area of chesed, the area of pleasure, is a complicated area to talk about for many different reasons. And because it's such a powerful concept, there's a lot of misconceptions around it. There's a lot of misunderstanding in those areas. There's a lot of people who feel like human pleasure is something ugly, something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't like or doesn't want or doesn't appreciate. They forget who created life in the first place, who created us the way that we are. And even though there are certain realities we have to face because of the level of evolution we stand in, the type of minds that we have, the way that we think, but we also need to recognize that this wasn't always the norm. People lived in many, many different ages, and they understood life from many different angles. And our understanding of life is not necessarily humane in the sense of how people used to look at life. And the same thing goes the opposite way, that we can say that the way that other people looked at life previously is inhumane compared to how we see life. And this is the nature of the human brain. This is how people recognize what they know as normal, as acceptable, as proper. But that's simply by the act of repetition. It doesn't make it real. The real is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created nature, which is something we need to study, we need to understand, we need to try to recognize why it was created the way that it was created and what was its intention. How does it really work? What was meant to be happening over here? What are things meant to be used? So when it comes to pleasure, the Christian idea of it is that it's bad, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't like it, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want it. But when you look in the Torah, we see a very different picture. We see a picture of it's something that is very powerful, it's something that is very useful, and is meant to be used in the appropriate way, because it's part of creation. And when it's used appropriately, it's Kodesh Mamish, it's a part of Kedusha, it's a part of Avodas Hashem. And when it's used inappropriately, it could be the mocker to a lot of suffering, a lot of problems, a lot of complication. And that's why it's such a complicated subject. Because not only is it complicated in its own right, but the way society has dealt with this complication, and the way some societies have tried to avoid dealing with this complication, they've caused tremendous amount of agony and pain, where people are at war with themselves. They don't understand themselves. They don't understand what's happening to them within them. And it causes that otherness that we spoke about. It causes a sitra achra to develop, where a person is not fully integrated with himself as one unit, as a being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, but there's a war happening within his own country, within his own land, within his own mind, within his own being. And this is only through misconception. This is through misunderstanding what was put in place within society, outside of society. And this goes back to the pasuk that we mentioned a few weeks ago, where Moshe Rabbeinu tells us, if you want to understand life, you have to be able to look at the history, right? Like it says, Binu shnois dor v'dor. You have to understand all the changes that happened in each generation to understand how we arrived to where we are. And when we understand how we arrived to where we are, then we'll understand why it's good for us to be the way that we are and what we can do to make it better. But if we don't understand how we even got to this place, so then we're fighting a war against an unknown enemy, an enemy that can't be seen. The only way to see the enemy is to see our history, to see how we were traumatized into this situation. How did it come to be that a man allowed himself to be reduced in his value more and more and more, from being looked at as a god a few thousand years ago to being looked at as something that's even less useful than an animal. People will sometimes make bigger demonstrations about animal cruelty than the daily cruelties that we do to each other on a daily basis. Because we don't really know the creature that we're dealing with. We don't really understand him. We don't really know how to use our forces in his defense and to help and to build him, because we've lost the basic value of what it means to be human. That's the value that our ancestors devoted all their lives to, and it's the value that we take for granted and we give it no second look. And therefore we don't build within ourselves the ability to appreciate the experience that we're having, the ability to appreciate what we're going through and what it actually means for our eternity. Because this is who we are. And how we interpret who we are is the experience we're going to create for that being. So this is already happening while we're learning. It's not like we're going to go to school, we're going to find out about it, and then we're going to try it in practice, and then we're going to do it. This is live. In live, the learning and the practicing happens live. And as we do it, we gain ourselves an eternity of it. We gain ourselves a relationship with it that is beyond any of the relationships we create in our lives. The closest person can never be half as close as one of your thoughts, one of your experiences. Because those you're taking with you to eternity, those define who you are and what you are and why you are. And the basic measurement of how these are going to be measured is, did it cause human beings pleasure or did it cause human beings pain? And this is a very strong statement, because it takes a tremendous amount of wisdom to be able to translate the Torah that we have into such a powerful statement. That everything will be measured at the end of the day. Did it cause human beings pleasure or did it cause human beings pain? And pain results in hell. And pleasure results in Gan Eden. Like we know the Rosh Hashanah, the very famous Rosh Hashanah on Eden, is the Nor and the Gan of the Gan Eden. They're the ones that bring Oineg, which means that you're identifying life from a place where you recognize that existence is Oineg, that's the gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu really gave you. All the other things you're trying to do with existence, those you made up. But the existence that you received as a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the pleasure that He gave you. Recognizing the seichel, the understanding of that gift, is a source of unconditional pleasure. Because it's a gift that you take with you every moment of your life. It's with you everywhere. But we don't notice that gift. We don't recognize it. We don't recognize the biggest part of our gift that we have, which is our existence. Our existence is the key to everything we've experienced and everything we're going to experience and everything we could experience. So to the extent that we understand that life is good, that the Creator is good, that existence is good, existence is the biggest gift you're ever going to receive. And you can start appreciating it the moment you realize it. And that appreciation can go deeper and deeper and deeper to eternity. Because all of eternity has been given to you as a gift the moment you received existence. Once you have existence, you got a key to eternity. You have a key to the whole kingdom. Figuring out how to use it, that's avodah. But you already received the gift. You already exist. You're already here. Before you weren't here. You had nothing. Now, whoever created in such a way that you end up existing. That's your gift. From that place, when we find pleasure in that place, when our brain is developed enough, when we're enough of a medaber, we've left the level of a chai, we left the level of a behemoth that can only find peace in physical stimulation, and we move up to the level of a human being that can find peace in words, and concept, and seichel, and understanding. So then that source of pleasure is the only pleasure we really need. Every other pleasure is to enhance that pleasure, is to be grateful again, is to recognize how deep HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves creation because He created it in such a way. This is why we make Birchas Hanahanan on food. It's not because the food is giving our body sustenance. It's not the reason for the bracha. And the raya is because when we take medicine that doesn't have a taste, we don't make a bracha. Even though the medicine is going to be even more useful to the body than food, we don't make a bracha on medicine. Because it's not about the fact that the food sustains your body. It's about the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that while you're going to sustain your body, which you need to do anyway, we're going to make it pleasurable. We're going to give it a good taste. That's why it's called Birchas Hanahanan. It's a bracha of pleasure. It's a bracha of recognizing that the Creator created the world that He wants you to enjoy. And this is the reason that we only make a bracha for creating man, Yetzer Adam, when a person gets married. Because we then understand how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. We then understand how He thinks about creation. And this is known that Amalek stands at the other opposite side of this spectrum. That's why Edom represents Ritzicha, because Amalek used to throw up the milas, the alis of Klal Yisrael, Klape Mala, and say, Til ma shebacharta, this is the Eved that you chose, take what you've chosen. Because they laugh at this thing. It's the same thing with Bilam that said, Misper es Reve Yisrael, he says, Mishi Kodesh, Mishasov Kedoshim, Mistakol Bedov Ezeh, Kivyochal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, has to do with Klal Yisrael's pleasure. How could it be somebody holy looks at that? And that's the look of the Goyim. That's how the Goyim see it. Klal Yisrael don't see it like that. Because recognizing creation for what it is, realizing the truth about life the way that it is, that's ultimately what we are about. Not trying to force life to be something else. To recognize it for what it is and live it the way that it is, the way that it was created, the way that it was intended. That's the purpose of life. So when we try to force our views of what's good and what's bad, we try to force our way of thinking upon life, we cause undescribable suffering. Suffering that happens on places that we can't see. They're not visible to the naked eye. But if we accumulate all that suffering, it probably outweighs the physical suffering that humanity has gone through by the billions. Because it's suffering that doesn't stop. It's suffering that just continues and continues because a person is not at peace with himself. He hasn't found shalom. He hasn't recognized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this being the way that it is, and that's how He wants it. Because that's how He created it. So we can only understand the Torah when we reconcile it with reality. And that's why the Torah gives us the entire history. The Torah is the one telling us every time that different minhagim and different changes happened in the norms of society and the way that we behave, the Torah documents that for us. But as you know, before the Mabul, people were extremely compulsive in this area, in the area of grabbing pleasure. And this was the beginning of a shift in understanding of this area in life. And a shift of hiding, and a shift of changing, and a shift of not talking about. The very seeds of those types of thinking started after the Mabul. And why did the Mabul happen? Because in Gan Eden, people were the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created them to be. But when we fell from our spiritual glory, when we started having the ability to manifest evil, people didn't have access to that oineg that we spoke about earlier, the oineg of the unity, the recognition of who they are as the source of their delight. So in order to maintain their emotional balance, in order to balance out their fears, they compulsively looked for pleasure at the account of other people. The freedom back then was something that we can't imagine. There was no civilization in the sense that we can understand it now. It was a very, very different mindset, very different understanding. But the evil that came from that was so powerful, the energy that came out of that, the anger between the people. And like Chazal teach us, that even them, even with their behavior, the Gezer only came out on Gezel, because of Gezel. Once they started taking each other's things, then we thought that their mind is corrupted. They're not even looking for pleasure anymore, they're just hurting each other. The Yetzer Machshav Es Libe Rak Rak Kol Hayom, he doesn't even know what he wants anymore, he just wants to hurt the other guy. The Zohar says that they used to have children and leave them, the wives and the children, in the field, like animals. They didn't give them a second thought. This is how humanity arrived to the place where we are now. We need to understand that because we need to recognize the blemish on our history. It's our behavior that caused us to be the way that we are, nobody else's. We, as humanity, as one united being, as one collective, have created this reality for ourselves over a period of thousands of years, and we have traumatized this tremendous being to the extent that it's hurting itself, that it's uncomfortable with itself, that it doesn't know how to interact with itself, because we've gotten so distracted by flashy things outside of us, we've forgotten the most important thing inside of us. The one that can manifest all thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The one that's in charge of humanity. The being that lives inside each one of us. He's the one that caused all the damage over all the generations, and he's the one that's going to cause the restoration if he wakes up appropriately. It's all within his power. So this blemish on humanity, this blemish on society that happened before the Mabul is still being avenged. We still haven't regained our maturity in that area since that time, for thousands of years. And in fact, all the cultures were built on the back of that happening. Right after the Mabul came the Dor HaFloga, came the people who were trying to create societies, they were trying to create order in all of that chaos and all of that misunderstanding. And that's when the concept of marriage started being established, so that people can have an understanding between each other of how they're going to interact, how they're going to help each other, so that both parties can maintain some stability and gain something out of that transaction. Unlike before the Mabul, where there was nothing to be gained. Everybody was just grabbing compulsively because they've lost the stability. They've lost access to the pleasure of being alive simply for being alive. That's the spiritual pleasure. And once that pleasure is gone, then all the other pleasures cannot fill that void. And as we've seen time and time again, people who have it all, and really they have nothing. Because they've lost the basic pleasure of being alive. And they've tried to fill that with all the fame and fortune and women and partying and whatever else they can get their hands on to fill that void, and none of it will fill that void. It's been tried and tested. And on the other hand, we can see people who've tried to fill that void with the appropriate words, with the appropriate experiences, with appropriate shifts in consciousness and different methods to spiritually relax the human nervous system, and they were successful. Not all of them, but some people have arrived, some people have achieved that tremendous goal, which is the ultimate goal of each human life. So that while he's still alive, while he's still embodied, he can become something, he can become somebody from a clear mind, from a proper perspective, from really understanding the nature of this experience and knowing how to use it wisely in order to prepare for himself a permanent abode. Because he knows already who he's working for. He's found that one within that's going to stick with him through the entire journey for eternity. The relationship we start with our eternity doesn't start when we pass on. It starts when we're born. As soon as we get to know ourselves, we've met the one we're going to spend eternity with. He is him, and he's going to be with you forever. And when you recognize how to service that being, that intelligence that created you, that intelligence that brought you out, that manifested you that very first moment, and is still the formula that's running you up until this very moment, creating all your thoughts, causing all your behaviors, all your interactions. When you recognize who you're really working for, that's when life starts. That's when the otherness can go away. That's when Leisinov and Leisitzach don't become a problem for you. And you can really recognize what HaKadosh Baruch Hu created and why he created it. Until then, it has to remain a secret. Because the secret is hidden within the human being himself. The secret is you. The secret is called also Shabbos, because Shabbos is about celebrating the real you. Shabbos is about recognizing that all the lamates melachas that we do all week is really the lamates klolas that we were cursed after the Chet of Adam Rishon. After the Nachash killed us, we got lamates melachas to get ourselves busy with. And that's the curse. And when that turns in your favor, then it becomes a tal of Tchias HaMeisim, a tal of Torah, a tal of understanding, recognizing what your real work is. What are you really building? And that it's not about the body. It's about the one that dwells within the body. And when we can create children with that awareness, then those children will be a different kind of child. Those children will be a different type of people. Those people will live with themselves in a different way because they will have a spiritual element within their very creation, within their very seed, that's going to allow them to have that connection from the moment they're born. And this is why we see special people brought special children into the world. It's not random. And by Klal Yisrael, we know the Sefer Yichus that we carried, because each Shevet has a specific type of thought process, has a specific type of gene, a specific type of understanding that Yaakov Avinu created in such a manner so that we have the full balance, so that we have what's necessary in order to survive as a people. And this is why he thought it was all gone, all for naught, when Yosef disappeared. Because to him, he understood how this is going to play out, and he understood the balance that Klal Yisrael will need in order to be able to survive what they're going to go through. And as soon as he saw that one of them is gone, to him that meant that this plan is not going to come into fruition. It's not going to become real, that it was all imagined. And that's why he couldn't have access to the Shekhinah. Because the Shekhinah is the recognition of what's true, of what's real, of recognizing that your life is a manifestation of something real. It's so real that it's going to guide you for the rest of eternity. Every moment is indescribable in how pregnant it is, and how much potential it has, and the possibilities of it. But we need to learn the mechanisms of how we take that potential and turn it into a manifestation. How we bring it out min hakoach el hapoel. That's what makes it real. That's what gives us access to it forever. So, what the Christians did in that sense to our beliefs is that they changed the way we feel when we have children. And this caused them to have such strong power that it lasted for 2 millennia. Because they got involved into a very, very deep place, a place that once a child is born, what happened in those few moments will guide this neshama for eternity. Because these are the moments that created its manifestation. These are the moments that manifested this reality, this being, from non-existence into existence. So this is the very seed of everything that's going to grow from that tree. And therefore, when the mind is impure in those moments, this has a tremendous effect on the child. This is the reason why Le'yovim Mamzer B'Kal Hashem, that he has been brought into life in such a way that it's not possible that his parents didn't believe at the moment that they did what they did, that something was wrong, and therefore he won't be able to find himself legitimate enough in this world by his very nature. Although Chazal teach us that a Mamzer Talmid Chacham is bigger than a Kohen Gadol Am Haaretz, meaning that through working on his own evolution, through working on identifying the truth, through working with words and concepts and ideas and experiences, he can change himself to the place where he can recognize something more than somebody that was born into it. Because that person didn't work in order to achieve that goal. So the work that a person can do is of a tremendous value. Not only can we work to correct the future, but we can also work to correct the past. Our spiritual beliefs don't dictate that past, present, and future go in a linear fashion. Past, present, and future interact with each other the same way that different areas on the planet interact with each other. It can go east and west, up and down, back and forth. And we know this by recognizing that everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu did with the Avos, He did because of their children. He did because of the future. Ki yedativ leman asher yitzav ezbonov. And this shows you that the causation of life is not from the past to the future, but from the future to the past. The future creates the past. What needs to happen to the future will cause the past and the present to line up in a certain way so that the future can take place appropriately. And this is probably the real key behind evolution, which is that humanity as a whole is working towards a specific manifestation. That's why they've evolved the way that they've evolved. It's not because it was necessarily the best next step from where they were, but because it was the best next step to get to where they're going. There's a very specific image in the mind of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, in the mind of creation that manifested before creation. A ripple, a thought, like Chazal teaches, Yisrael oli b'machshava tchila. The concept of Yisrael, the concept of living life in a certain format, in a certain fashion, which is kulay oinig, which is kulay tzadikim yojim v'nehanim eziv hashchina, that perpetuated that life should come into existence, the way that we know it. And therefore, everything that's happened till now has been happening in order to take us to where we are, because from where we are we can get to where we're going. This is how life has perpetuated itself. So that at the end, when we recognize what was really created, we recognize that each step that happened on the way there was necessary. And this is the human being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu envisioned. This is the reason why life is the way that it is. Life happened the way that it happened, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a specific vision. It's no different than a tree. A tree grows over a few years, but the tree of humanity, the tree of the people, the tree of the beliefs, the philosophies, the understandings, and the experiences grows over thousands of years. And nature hasn't completed its job yet, and therefore it doesn't look finished, it doesn't look ready. It's like trying to bite into a fruit that hasn't been fully ripened. It still needs to stay on the tree until it's ripe, and then the fruit will make sense to you. When you'll see nature's job in its entirety, then you'll recognize its purpose. Then you'll see what it really is. Then you'll be able to give it credit. But now, to recognize that, you need insight, you need seichel, you need Torah, you need to be able to delve into the reality that we have, recognize where it's going in order to see, in order to understand where this is headed and why it is the way that it is. And the past will tell you the details of what happened in order to get to the place that we are, so that we can understand the underlying causes, the underlying historical facts, the underlying narrative that actually took place in order to cause us to be where we are. Because the spiritual explanation is no different than the physical explanation. The spiritual explanation is dressed within the physical explanation. So we look at the manifestations, we know what was going on emotionally, we know what was going on intellectually, we know what was going on within desires. We can identify, we can analyze from the actual manifestations of the people, the behaviors, the causation that caused different things to come into existence, different laws, different understandings, different social norms, different social determinations, and sometimes invasive rules, sometimes even madness, complete madness, like we've seen in the last 80 years, where complete madness could take over. But as it's happening, it looks like a natural phenomenon. It's just happening. People believe, people understand, people are getting involved. And then as it manifests, those who can see from the seed can recognize, but once it manifests from the manifestations, all can see what was really at the root, what was really being created. And therefore, the moments of conception are again and again emphasized in the Torah as the moments that are most deterministic of the child's future. They take tremendous importance. What happens in those moments can never be undone. And we take it lightly. because of lack of understanding and because of our inability to speak openly about things that are important to speak about sometimes, because the consequences are so severe. They're so real. They're so serious. They're not to be taken simply as another statement, another saying. There's something very, very real, because this is how nature designed it to be. This is how life really happens. And we need to respect what really happens, because that's what's real. That's who we are. We're real. Kadosh Baruch Hu is real. Everything that's real takes precedence. Chamir sakanta me'isira, because sakanta is a manifested problem. And the Isser is an unmanifested problem. So we have to be even more careful when we can see how something causes damage. We have to be even more careful than with the things that we can't see how they do damage. All of it we need to be careful with, because we don't understand enough. We're so removed from our subtle reality, from what's happening inside and why it's happening and how it's happening. But when we can see we're causing damage, those are the things we have to eliminate first. Those are the types of transgressions that our neshama cannot be mevater on. Not only is it not mevater on it, but it records it in a way where it starts creating that same type of experiences for you, because it becomes part of your personality. This is who we are. We are the collection of everything we've done, everything we've seen, everything we've heard, everything we've understood. That's who we are. That's what defines us. So when we create, and we're always creating thoughts, we have to be careful what we create. When we create even more, meaning we're bringing it out into chakika voices, if we're causing dibur to happen, we need to raise our level of awareness, raise our level of carefulness, raise our filters. And when we create the ultimate creation, we create another child, we create another human being, then the level of how careful we are needs to go up in a tremendous, tremendous degree of how we go about human pleasure, how we understand ourselves. Because in essence, the Swarm teaches us that the relationship a person has with this area, the relationship a person has with his bris, the relationship a person has with human pleasure, is going to affect his entire life cycle. It's going to affect everything that happens to him and how he thinks about it. And this is why it's called the Yesod. The Yesod means that this is the base of the entire building. Everything, your whole personality gets built on this. This is the beginning. And this is, in Galus Edom means that this area gets disturbed. This area gets misunderstood. That this area could turn into what's called in the Psukim, Cherev Nekemes Nekam Bris. And this is Esav's midah, Al-Char B'chotichya. This is the midah of Edom. This is the Christian mentality. That it's a Cherev Nekemes Nekam Bris, Kevyocha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teasing you. He's giving you something you want so that he can take it away from you. Chaz v'shalom. That's the extreme opposite of believing that there is a kind creator that created everything that needs to be created the way that he created it. And this is why it's the deepest of the Goliaths. In Mitzrayim, we know that the Noshim Tzidkonios, they used to go to their husbands and make sure that they can co-create, that they create children, even though the children were thrown into the river. Amram separated, and Miriam convinced him that was wrong to do. So he had to take her back. And that's how we had a Moshe Rabbeinu. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a Moshe Rabbeinu. And still, in the Agada, it says, Vayar Sanyenu Zaprishis Derech Eretz. Kavyochal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees a Sanyenu. He sees the Aniyus. What's the Aniyus? That they couldn't have pleasure the way that Klaus was supposed to have pleasure. We know by Shifcha. When a person marries his Shifcha, he can't take away her pleasure because this is a basic necessity of life. And this is always the attitude of the Torah, that what nature created, what nature made to be, we need to respect. And respecting other human beings, giving other human beings dignity, means respecting how they were created in every detail. Because this is what he created, this is what he foresaw, this is what he designed. It's not us that created it. He created it. And we need to respect that. We need to recognize it. And one of the principles that the Christians try to bring into our mind, bring into our awareness through this type of thinking is that the devil has his own kingdom in heaven, that he is a power outside of Kaviyachal, outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is pure heresy. This is probably worse than the shitvus that they made with Osar Ish, is that they created Elohim Acherim. They gave legitimacy to a being that has no legitimacy. Adarabah. Our belief of a Yetzirah is very, very different. We don't believe the Yetzirah has a domain, has a force, has a power. We believe that the human's lack of knowledge causes him to act out in an evil way. And that's why we call it Yetzer Hara. Yetzer is something that we create. We have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. So when we have a desire for something, for Chesed or for Gvura, we're going to design this image. This Yetzer is going to design a tzura in our minds that's either going to be to do the Chesed in the appropriate manner or to do the Chesed in the wrong manner. That's the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer is merumez in the Nekud of Tzerei. That's why Tzerei has two dots, one to the right and one to the left. One is the Yetzer Tov and one is the Yetzer Hara. These two are the Yetzorim that are Metzayer the Tzura within your mind. These are your two options at any given way. And that's why we always say that a Yid goes to the right. A Yid is Metzayer a good image. A Yid creates something better. It creates something good, something kind. But not Chaz v'Sholom to say that within the creation of the universe, that there was a foreign power, that there was somebody else, that there's something else. This was a result of completely misunderstanding the basic limut. That's why Chazal tell us that he was a Talmud she'igdiach tafshila. He burned his tafshil, he burned the food that he was cooking. And we see this in the Zohar also, this lashon of the bashil b'shula. It means that in the beginning, they would cause the students to learn exclusively and be separated from Olam Hazeh in order for them to develop their brain over all the other five senses, to give the brain dominance over all the other senses so that the intellect and the emotions can take the prominence that they deserve for the koich hadibur, because this is still part of the development of the child. The child isn't fully developed when he comes out, so his koiches hadibur need to be developed and need to be given prominence over all the other koiches. And then they would tell them the pnimius of the Torah, the truth about different things in life that the Talmud wasn't ready for. But this Talmud was igdiach tafshila, meaning that he never got to the place where they actually explained to him everything. He never arrived there. And therefore, he didn't really know the depth of what he was learning. He didn't fully understand who he was dealing with and why he was dealing with him. And this caused a tremendous misunderstanding in how the world sees today life. And the world as a being is a tremendously traumatized being. It's been traumatized over thousands of years. And it's our job to find healing. And it's not an easy job. The collective spirit is in dire straits, as we can see individually. But we have the ability, we have the power, the same way that we have the power to do the damage, we have the power to fix it. And Bezrat Hashem, if we'll all give all that we have to recognize our true source, to recognize who we should be giving to and who we should be paying back to, who we should be grateful to, and who we should be giving all our efforts to, then we'll be zeichet to the Gula Shleim of Meher B'Yameinu.